Hi guys, in this video we are going to begin American literature. What do you mean by American literature? American literature is the literature published predominantly in English in US or the preceding colonies. In this video we are going to have an introduction to American literature. So, what was America, or what is the history of America? We all know that America was discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1492. And when Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492, there were native people settled in America. But the discovery of America, being a very vast place with a very little number of natives, attracted many people, especially the British people, who were fed up with the religious intolerance that they had to suffer in Britain, and they all find America to be the perfect land to migrate, and many people started to migrate to America. And Christopher Columbus termed America as the New World because it is a set of new culture. People were migrating in the hope of new land, and therefore that is the reason why he named it as the New World. And Europeans, they started to settle in their colonies, and the first city they named it, or the first colony, they named it as Virginia after Queen Elizabeth. And among the many races of people who settled in America, so there were many races from Britain, from France, from Spain, so from many different areas America has got settlers. And among all these settlers, you could find that when the settlers came to America with all their cultivation and with all their civilization and sophistication, the native people, they were forced to be marginalized, they were forced to be colonized. Okay, because they were not, just like how the Britishers colonized Africa, treating them to be very, calling them niggers or calling them Negroes with very, and treating them as barbaric. Here also the Native Americans, who only had the oral tradition of literature, they were basically marginalized by all these settlers who came to America. And American multiculturalism, you can find a melting pot, even in the case of literature, in the case of religion, in the case of culture, whatever be it, there is a multiculturalism. They were like a melting pot, because the people from different kinds of different parts of the world came to America to have a new beginning. Some want to keep their tradition, while some want to break away from their tradition. So there were different varieties of people who came as settlers to America, and therefore you can say that America had to follow a system of multiculturalism. And about the pre-colonial era in the sense colonial, the time of America where Britishers were not exerting their power over the native people. About the pre-colonial era, the North American people, they spoke different languages, and they had diverse mythological and religious beliefs. They never had a unity within themselves, and that is one of the primary reasons why Americans were conquered, or why Americans were colonized easily. They had got a diverse culture. They spoke diverse language. They followed a variety of mythologies and religious beliefs. And Native Americans, they used oral culture. They never followed a pattern of writing down literary text or other art forms, but they had a tradition of oral literary form, and that is why we don't have much of the history of American literature before the colonial period. And Europeans started writing about the experiences of America, and it became known as American literature. When Europeans started to settle down in America, or when Europeans came for missionary purposes in America, they started to write about what happened to them in America, and they started to write about their travel experiences, and these works were known as American literature. But remember, these works were written by Europeans and not by the Americans. And there is a system called the brief, and the brief is the writings between the kings of the Europe and their officials in America, because the kings, in order for the people to settle down, the kings send their officials to get a record of what is happening in America. and this communication is what is called as the briefs. So the early American literature is marked with the writings of the brief, where you would get an idea about how the Europeans came to America, how they settled in America, and what are the struggles they had to face in settling in America. And then after many years, printing press came in America. With the arrival of the printing press, rather than making their own literature or finding uniqueness in their literature, there was a tendency to follow the literary works of the European, and therefore many hybrid texts were published, and this talked about the complexities about the integration of the American culture. And the first successful English settlement, it happened in Jamestown. I want you to remember the name. It is in Jamestown the first successful English settlement happened, and you can say that it marked the beginning of the colonial period. So we were discussing about the pre-colonial period, where the American natives, they followed the oral tradition in literature, and when the Europeans settled down in Jamestown, it marked the beginning of the colonial period, because the Britishers or the Europeans, they treated themselves as very aristocratic, very cultivated and civilized people, while they treated the Native Americans to be barbaric and less civilized. And it gradually raised to the outbreak of American Revolution. So the colonial period in America entered, or the colonial period in America became very strong, that the colonization in America became very strong, that it gradually rise to the American Revolution. And it was also the time of African American writings, because of course there was a distinction in races where black people were treated as slaves. So it gradually paved way to African American writings. And about the religion, as I said earlier, America followed the path of multiculturalism, a melting pot system, and there were different types of religious people. One were the Pilgrims and the other were the Puritans. And we all know about the Puritans. They are extremely religious people, and they started to settle in Massachusetts after being thrown out of Europe. They accepted John Calvin's philosophies, and they believed themselves to be the chosen people who are supposed to convert other people to Christianity, or who are supposed to make the Christians' faith extreme stronger. So they were the extreme people who believed in all the extremities, and who also believed that it is their right to make people rich in belief, or it is their duty to make people firm in their belief. So their ways were also extreme. And they started a literary movement called the Great Awakening, which is a series of Christian revivals that swept in Britain and the 13 North American colonies in the 1730s and 1740s. And next we have to look at the American Declaration of Independence. Hope you have heard of this American Declaration of Independence, because the entire American dream and the American pursuit of happiness depends on this American Declaration of Independence. And you can find that there were 13 colonies, 13 British colonies, or 13 colonies in America that were under the direct rule of Britishers. And these 13 colonies, they were extremely unhappy about the settlement and about the colonization and the British rule, and their problems were ignored. Their problems, since they have no right over themselves being colonized people, they had to go to the Britishers for every help or for every right, and this gradually led to a commotion and finally to a revolution. And the nationalist leaders, they formed a Continental Congress in 1744, and this Continental Congress, they sent a list to King George III, who was the then ruler of Britain. They sent it to King George III which put forward the struggles and the grievances they had suffering in America. And this list were consequently rejected, and they decided to fight for their freedom. And they decided to write a declaration of their independence, and they assigned 5 people to compose it. and the 5 people are, you have to remember the name of the 5 people who were involved in drafting the Declaration of American Independence, and they are Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Roger Sherman and Robert Livingston. Okay, so remember, these are the 5 people. These are the 5 people who were there in drafting the American independence. It aimed to unite the different states of America and to establish United States. The main aim of the Declaration of America, Declaration of Independence of America, was to unite these 13 colonies that were under the British rule and to form their own government. And in July 14, 1766, 56 delegates officially signed the Declaration of United States. You have to remember the date of the signing of American Declaration, that is on July 4th, 1766. And in that day you can find that the 13 British colonies, they came together to become a union of new free and independent states. So these 13 colonies who were under the British rule became free and independent states after signing the American Declaration of Independence. And moving on to the next topic, now we are going to have a look on the different leaders of America. Okay, the different leaders of America during the early American settlement or during the early American period. The Great Awakening. As I said earlier, there was a group of the Puritans who settled in America who believed themselves to be the supposed people who are supposed to bring faith among the people, or who are supposed to make the faith of the people more firmer. And you can find that this movement of the Great Awakening was or you can call an Evangelian awakening in Britain, and this is actually a series of events that happened in America in order to make people more firm in their religious beliefs. And one of the important figures related to Great Awakening is John Winthrop. John Winthrop, he is known for his speech called A Model of Christian Charity. A model of Christian charity, which he delivered while on a ship. And in that sermon you can find that he discusses about how people should live and behave following religious practices, because they are moving from Europe to America, from a country which believed in literary tradition, and they are a group of people who believe that art is immoral or art is corrupting the youth. Okay, so they were trying to make the people believe that this is how you are supposed to live, this is how you are supposed to believe. And the second one is Anne Bradstreet. Anne Bradstreet can be considered as America's first published poet, and she speaks about the Puritan faith and also criticized the rigid rules. So there were not just writers who believed in the Puritan beliefs, but there were also people who criticizes the very rigid and extreme Puritan beliefs, and Anne Bradstreet was one among them. And in 1650 she published a work called The 10th Muse Lately Sprung Up in America. The 10th Muse Lately Sprung Up in America, and where she got the title America's first published poet. Then we have Jonathan Edwards. Jonathan Edwards is a North American revivalist and Congregationalist Protestant theologian. He delivered the sermon, and the sermon is very important because the name of the sermon is Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, and during another revival in 1749. So sinners in the hands of an angry God, the very name itself suggests that God is angry with the people being sinners, and what makes them sinners or what makes them immoral. So it is basically a call for the people to come back to the God, come back to their religious beliefs in order to protect themselves from the hands of the angry God. So these are the 3 important leaders that you can find in the early American period, and that is all about the early American period, or about the introduction to American literature. Thank you.